What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel today. After yesterday's video on King Groot was received so well, I decided to go ahead and do the same thing for Angela and kind of break down the MCOC mod video that came out yesterday, kind of detailing their abilities and showing some of the gameplay for both of them. And to be totally honest with you, Angela was a much more difficult character to understand than King Groot was. If you could just figure out that he had a cooldown stage and a Fury stage, I mean, that was really all that was to King Groot. But Angela is a much more complex character, and if you're anything like me, you're probably scratching your head trying to figure out how to use her. So I think I have got it figured out, I think. I'm going to do my best to explain everything clearly to you before we get into the gameplay, and then I will break that down just like we did yesterday. So let's get right into it. I'm going to jump over to the special attacks. We will read through those briefly, and then we'll get into the gameplay. So her special attacks are by far the easiest part to understand of her, so we'll start there before we get into anything else. Her S1 Sword of the Stars, has a 100% chance to gain Fury for 5 seconds. If she does have a Fury active on her, instead of being 5 seconds, it's going to be a 20-second Fury that she gains from her S1. Her special attack 2, Blades of Ichor, don't quote me on that one, has a 100% chance to armor up, so just like the special 1 has a 100% chance to Fury, special attack 2 is a 100% chance to armor up. And just like S1, if there is a current armor up on her, it's going to last for 20 seconds and instead of 5. So the S1 and the S2 are both the exact same attacks as far as what they do. The S1 gains Fury, lasts for 20 seconds if there's a current Fury. Special attack 2, armor up. If there's a current armor up, lasts for 20 seconds. So that's fairly straightforward. And then finally her S3. There's not a lot there. It just says basically she has increased attack for each buff active on her, martial mastery. So like I said, pretty straightforward. Just keep all that in mind. I'll go over it again once we get into the gameplay. Okay, so now we'll start at her signature ability because that really doesn't necessarily affect the rest of her gameplay. This is kind of something separate. So Battle Focus is her signature ability. As Angela enters combat, she gains greater and greater focus, allowing each buff active on her to reduce all nullify abilities chance to trigger against her by 35%. So basically, if you have 2 buffs active, you have a 70% chance to not have any of your buffs nullified. If you have 3, you're going to have over 100% chance. Kind of an interesting signature ability. I'm not sure we've ever seen anything quite like this before. I guess this is so that you can take her as a Cosmic up against any Mystic champs and not worry about her losing any of her buffs. I would say that obviously she is built around her buffs. You'll see that as we go through here. And if you were running up against a Doctor Strange or somebody who was constantly nullifying those buffs, she would be pretty useless. So I guess Battle Focus is kind of Kabam's way of working around playing characters that can nullify like that. So like I said, straightforward. Let's move into the more difficult part to understand here. So let's go ahead and read through her first passive ability here. For each 10% of max health that you lose, you're going to gain a resilience counter, and I'll show you what that looks like in the gameplay. But immediately that resilience counter is going to turn into a regen. You can see there it lasts for 10 seconds. Now, if you have a regen that is active, so let's say you get to 90% health, you've lost 10, you're immediately going to regen. Let's say you take 10% more damage, 10% more of your health is lost, now you're down at 80%, but you've still got your regen that's going, it hasn't dropped off yet. That resilience counter, even though you've lost 10% more of health, is not immediately going to become a regen. Your regen is going to continue until it falls off. That resilience counter is going to sit there. And then as soon as the first regen falls off, the resilience counter becomes the regen and it takes its place. So you have the possibility to always have a regen going, but you can never, regardless of how much health you lose, it's never going to stack those resilience counters. You're never going to be able to stack those regenerations. So that it sounds confusing, but I'll show you in the gameplay. It's really not that confusing. The part that I found confusing, especially when I was just first reading it, is definitely how she gains her buffs. So I think what I want to do is just read through all this, and it's going to be much easier to explain if you can actually see it in the gameplay. So I'll read through this quickly, and then we'll spend more time over in the gameplay side explaining it all. So Angela gains a buff based on her current power level. and she has 4 separate power levels, so you can read through them there. There's less than a special attack 1, she gains armor up. As soon as you hit special 1, you gain fury, special 2, precision, and special 3, you gain 50%. It increases the effect of all of your abilities by 50% once you hit a special attack 3. And when you're in each one of these power levels, each time that you crit, you're going to duplicate that buff for that particular power level. So I'm not going to spend like a lot of time, like I said, talking through this. It's a lot easier to show you everything over in the gameplay section. So let's just keep moving on, hang on to all that, and we'll finish out here. Heavy attacks are really the only other thing. They receive additional critical rating, which I find kind of interesting. I guess the thought process here is if you can parry and stun and then do a heavy attack, you're almost guaranteed a crit. So if you know, like you want to get a fury buff or something stacked, you can stun, you can do a heavy attack, and depending upon what power level you're at, you're basically going to be guaranteed to duplicate that buff. So let's go ahead and let me edit the video here, and we'll move forward into the gameplay. Okay, so here we are in the gameplay section, and I apologize I can't make this full screen. It doesn't record quite smoothly enough, so I'm going to record it here this way just like I did King Groot. So the first thing to notice is that because we are below 1 bar of power every time we start a fight, we're going to immediately start the fight each time with an armor up ability. So you're just going to have to go back and memorize the different power levels and what you get, but just keep in mind whenever you start the fight, because you're below 1 bar of power, you're always going to receive an armor up. And really the only thing you can do here now is if you crit, you're going to duplicate that armor up. And let me play it. I don't think she crits here at the beginning. Let's see. Yeah, we got no crit, which means we should be pushing our special 1 here shortly. Okay, so there we go. We pushed ourselves from below 1 bar of power into a full bar of power, and that moved our buff from the armor up over into the fury. So again, if we are at 1 full bar of power, if we get a crit while we're in this state, it's going to duplicate that fury buff. So let's play it again. Okay, right there, what happened is I went below 10% health. So technically what happened is I received a resiliency counter, but because I did not have a regen currently going, that immediately became a regen. So you didn't actually see the resiliency buff. It just immediately became a regen. So let's play it here. All right. So I have used my special attack 1, and what is happening is I have fallen below 1 bar of 1 bar of power. So I immediately got an armor up, and during the special 1 animation, I actually crit. So because I'm below 1 bar of power, it duplicates the armor up. That's why I have 2 armor up abilities. And then keep in mind, at the end of this animation, the special attack 1 has a 100% to gain fury, so you're going to see me get a fury buff as well. Okay, so there it was. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that for each crit, I'm going to be getting an armor up ability because I'm below 1 bar of power. But I can only stack those to a max of 2, so I've already reached my max. So anytime I crit, instead of stacking a third one, it just refreshes the current armor up abilities that I have, and I think you'll see that here. Yeah, I'm using a heavy for the guaranteed crit basically, and it just continually refreshes that armor up ability. So my regen has fallen off. I've pushed myself into 1 bar of power, so I got my fury again. And I think here I think he hits me with an S2. Yep, hits me with an S2, so you'll see here shortly. There it is. I lost 10% more of my health, so my regen, or I should say my resiliency counter buff popped up. But again, just like the first time, because I don't have an active regen, it immediately does become a regen. So we're getting ready to push ourselves into 2 bars of power, which means we're going to drop off the fury buff and we're going to pick up a precision buff. Alright, so there it is right there. We gained 2 bars of power, fury dropped off, precision came up, and our armor up originally from critting when we were below 1 bar of power is also getting ready to fall off. Okay, so something new has happened. I know I'm pausing it a lot, but hope this isn't going too fast. Because I have a regen going on the character, I was pushed another 10% below on my health, and my resiliency buff is the purple heart there that you're seeing pop up. And again, that will not immediately become a regen if you have one active. As soon as that regen falls off, that resiliency buff will take its place, and the regen will just continue. Now at this point, I use my special 2, which has a 100% chance to gain an armor up, but again, that doesn't happen till the end of the animation. What you're seeing, and the reason why I have an armor, is because again, I have fallen below 1 bar of power, so that is my armor up state. It gives me the armor up. If I crit during this animation, I'm going to get another armor up. If not, there's a 100% chance to get it, and there you go. I'm at 2 armor ups. And I don't believe I crit. Oh, I did right there. Okay, so my crit from below 1 bar of power has got my armor up. Now I'm above 1 bar of power, so I've gone into Fury. I got a crit while I was in Fury, so it stacked twice. As soon as I get pushed here, yep, there it was. So I got pushed into 2 bars of power, and my precision buff kicked on. There's a lot to this character. I'm sorry, but you're just gonna have to go back and watch it a couple times. All right, so there is the aptitude buff, and that's that yellow kind of. I believe it's supposed to be like an arrow pointing up with a lightning bolt. Is what it looks like. But basically, any buffs that I have on myself currently, I think it's Fury, Armor Up, the precision buffs. It does not affect the regeneration. Have their effectiveness increased by 50%. So, unfortunately, in this example, the only thing I have active for buffs is the regeneration, so it doesn't help it there. So I believe she uses her S2, or excuse me, her S3, which her S3 looks really, really cool. Again, this the damage that it does, excuse me, is increased by the number of buffs that you have. And of course, we're gonna get hit by the S3 here. Let me skip forward a little bit. Okay, and well, we missed it. That happened all so quickly. Let me go back real quick. Play and pause. Okay, man, I missed it again. It's such a small window. Let's see, play and pause. Okay. So, you really didn't get to see it because we used our S3, then he used his S3, but basically what happened is we used up all of our power, so we fell back below 1 bar of power, so it pushed us into our armor up. Because of all the damage that we took during his special 3, we took at least 30% damage, and we know that 30% of our max damage, and we know that because 3 resiliency buffs are stacked up there. So those are just gonna keep being used up one after the other as the regens expire, and that is pretty much the end of the fight right there. So I appreciate you guys sitting through this one. I know there was a lot of information to cover there. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them for you. Your best thing to do is just to go back and watch that gameplay. Watch the gameplay a couple times, and then go back and try to memorize the different buff states that she is in for below 1 bar of power, and then for each time she crosses over a bar of power 1, 2, and 3. If you can get those memorized, you'll be well on your way to understanding this character. Alright, as always, go over to MCOC Mod, go to his channel. I'll have it linked down in the description. Give it a thumbs up. Appreciate him getting this information out to the public so that we can do an early review. Alright guys, as always, thanks for the support. Until the next video, have a great day.